I'm Rachel Morgan, 34 years old, and 2 months ago, I opened the drawer where I always kept my engagement ring, the one Everett and I designed together, the one he saved for 3 years to make perfect. It wasn't there. My mother was in the kitchen drinking coffee, and without even looking up, she said, "Oh, that. We sold it." Said it like she was talking about old shoes. Said my sister needed to heal in Bali. They didn't know it yet, but what I did next would be the last thing they ever expected from me. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from, and if you've ever had something stolen right out from under, you hit that like button. Everett had been gone 2 years. Not sudden, not dragged out. One ordinary Tuesday, he collapsed in the parking lot of a diner while waiting to pick up my favorite pie. Just like that, the world lost its shape. I moved back in with my parents a few months after the funeral. It wasn't what I wanted. I was working remotely in marketing, trying to keep my head above water, trying not to drown in the silence he left behind. My parents, Vera and Jean, lived just outside Denver in the house I grew up in. Split-level ranch, nothing fancy. Vera always kept the lawn neat, but inside was more clutter than comfort. They said I could stay as long as I needed. They said they were glad to have me home. I believed them. Growing up, my mother liked things tidy, predictable. My father valued being practical. We weren't the kind of family that raised our voices. That didn't mean there wasn't tension. It just meant we pressed it down until it hardened. I was the older daughter, the dependable one. Callista was 4 years younger, louder, harder to pin down. My parents said she was sensitive. What they meant was she caused scenes, and I was the one expected to fix them. Everett used to tell me I held everything together while the house quietly burned. I didn't wear the ring every day. Some days it hurt too much, but I kept it in the second drawer of my nightstand, always the same place. The velvet box was navy blue with a stitched white daisy in the corner. He picked that fabric because on our first road trip, we camped near a field of wild daisies in Utah. That morning, I was getting ready to visit the cemetery. I reached for the drawer without thinking. When I saw the space empty, I thought maybe I'd moved it. Checked the other drawers under the bed, even the closet. But deep down, I already knew. I went downstairs, still in my socks. Vera was reading the lifestyle section, stirring her coffee like nothing had changed. "Mom," I said, "do you know where my ring is?" She barely blinked. That we sold it. Callista needed help for her retreat. I thought maybe I'd misheard. What retreat spiritual thing? In Bali. She's healing. Then my dad appeared in the hallway. "You weren't wearing it anymore, Rachel. We figured you didn't need it." They sold a $590,000 ring, the last thing Everett ever gave me, and didn't even bother to tell me. Said it like they dropped off dry cleaning. When I told them it wasn't theirs to sell, they just looked at me. My father shrugged. My mother rolled her eyes. "It's not like you're still getting married," she said. I walked back upstairs. Not angry, numb. I sat on the floor with the empty velvet cloth in my hands, ran my fingers over the daisy embroidery. They hadn't just sold the ring. They'd sold the only piece of him I had left, and somehow I already knew this wasn't the worst of it. When Sunday night came, I still hadn't left my room. I'd stayed in the same spot most of the weekend floor beside the bed, back against the wall, the velvet cloth folded in my lap. My appetite was gone. I'd only managed a few crackers and a glass of water. The quiet in the house was heavy, like it knew what had happened and didn't want to get in the way. I hadn't checked my phone since Friday morning. Part of me was afraid to. I didn't want to see a message from my mother asking me to be more understanding. I didn't want to see a text from Callista pretending not to know anything about the ring. But eventually I turned the screen on. Not because I was ready, just because hiding started to feel worse. The moment it lit up, my stomach tightened. There she was. Callista standing on some polished yoga deck in the middle of Bali. Behind her there were trees and flowers strung into garlands. Her arms were raised like she was giving herself to the sky. And the caption said, "Healing is expensive, but so worth it. Grateful to my amazing family for believing in my journey." A heart emoji, a lotus, sunlight glowing behind her hair like it was staged for a wellness ad. I stared at that image until my hands started to tremble. Then I scrolled. More photos, more stories. Her smiling with strangers in sarongs. Her on a mountaintop holding a crystal. A short clip of her speaking at some kind of retreat, gathering her voice soft, telling a circle of women that letting go was the greatest gift she ever gave herself. Then came the tags, yoga brands, a feature in some niche wellness blog. One paragraph talked about overcoming family dysfunction. Another praised her for choosing growth over pain. My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. She never said anything about the ring, or the money, or what was lost to give her this spotlight. While she was dancing under palm trees, I was sleeping on the floor of the bedroom I grew up in because my parents had given away the bed I bought after Everett died. They said it was too big for one person anyway. I kept scrolling, but my mind was already dragging me backward. I remembered the tantrums Callista used to throw when we were kids, the slammed doors, the way Mom would sigh and turn to me whispering, "You're the strong one, Rachel. Help me keep the peace." I never applied for that job, but it stuck. Everett used to say, "You don't have to hold the house up just because they won't." But I guess I hadn't held it well enough, because now they were lighting the match, and I was left in the smoke. Around 8:30, I got in the car and drove out to the cemetery. The gate creaked like always, and the wind had picked up enough to shake a few loose leaves across the path. I didn't bring flowers. I didn't kneel. I just stood there. "They used your ring, Everett," I said out loud. "They sold it so she could post gratitude quotes in Bali." The wind moved again, slow and cold. It felt like something inside me gave way. When I got home, I went right back to the floor. I opened her page again just to see. There was a drone shot of rice fields. Callista was in mid-spin arms, out captioned, "Sometimes you have to leave the noise to find your soul." I didn't think. I just typed, "Hope the healing was worth it." I paid for it. Then I hit send. 10 minutes later, it was gone, deleted. At 10:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Let your sister have this moment. Don't start drama." Drama. That's what they called it. Not theft, not betrayal, just drama. I didn't reply. I just kept staring at that message until the words went blurry. Then I scrolled back up and looked at Callista's face again. Grief isn't loud. It's not screaming or throwing things. It's being erased slowly while the world claps for the person holding the eraser. I wasn't trying to start anything. I just didn't want to disappear again. 3 days passed. On Wednesday morning, I sat at the same kitchen table where I used to eat Cheerios before school. Across from me was a folder neatly closed, everything inside stacked carefully. There were partial receipts from the ring's purchase, an email Everett had sent me about the appraisal, and a handwritten letter from his parents written right after he died. "Thank you for caring for the ring until it became part of your new chapter together." I slid the folder across the table to my father. He didn't touch it. He was reading the Denver Post, stirring his coffee. Finally, he said, "You keep going like this, Rachel, and you'll ruin your own peace. We can't undo what's done." I stared at him. You could at least acknowledge what it was. He sighed, folded the paper, looked at me for the first time. "You've been living here 2 years rent-free. We've given you more than enough. It's just a ring." Then he reached for a white envelope and slid it toward me. I recognized the letterhead, instantly gold embossed from a law firm. My chest went tight. Inside was a formal statement. It said that all contents in the house, including the ring, were legally owned by Vera and Jean Morgan. They didn't just take the ring. They wanted me to know that nothing here was mine. Not anymore. Later that afternoon, the sky turned heavy and gray. That kind of gray that seeps into your bones. I walked into the garage without thinking, just needing air that hadn't passed through anyone else's mouth. I sat on an old crate labeled Rachel, College, brushed off some dust, opened it. Inside were my old yearbooks, a frayed guitar strap, and at the very bottom, a sealed envelope with my name on it. Everett's handwriting careful and slanted, unmistakable. My hand shook when I opened it. Inside was a sticky note. Just one line. Don't let them take your voice or your worth. I didn't move for a long time. Just sat there holding that piece of paper like it could keep me from disappearing completely. That night, dinner was meatloaf and green beans. Nothing special. Halfway through the meal, my mother raised her glass and said, "Here's to Callista, her growth, her healing, her courage. What a transformation." No one looked at me. I raised my glass halfway, then set it down and stood up. "I'll be upstairs." As I walked away, my father muttered under his breath, "That girl needs perspective." I didn't turn around. Upstairs, I pulled out a storage bin from under the bed. Inside were old bills, receipts, insurance forms, and printouts from Everett's email. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just needed to feel like I still had something that belonged to me, something that wasn't theirs. I powered on the scanner and fed in one page after another. I labeled folders. I built timelines. Somewhere along the way, I stopped crying. I stopped asking to be seen. Something in me had shifted. They took the ring, but they hadn't taken the truth. Not yet. By Thursday night, the pile of documents on my desk had nearly doubled. Receipts, emails, appraisal forms, transfers, all of it scanned, labeled, and tucked into a folder I named Truth. I hadn't said a word to anyone since dinner. I wasn't avoiding them. There was just nothing left to say. Outside, it had started to rain. That kind of steady drizzle that makes the world go soft around the edges. I sat at my laptop, highlighting part of an old email Everett had sent me when I brushed the trackpad by accident. A browser tab I didn't even remember opening popped up. And then a voice. Healing begins when we release the roles other people force us into. I didn't move. My hand hovered in the air. The screen showed the banner for a podcast I'd forgotten Callista had been on. The host's voice came next. "That's powerful, Callista. Can you share an example?" There was a pause, then the sound of her sipping something. I had to separate myself from the grief in our family. Some people cling to pain like it's part of their personality. I couldn't move. She was talking about me. I walked away, she said. It cost me a lot. But I chose joy. I let go of the things that were tied to trauma. Objects, symbols of emotional debt. You can't carry those and still move forward. I mean, rings are just things. Things soaked in pain. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, not because I was tired, just because I'd stopped blinking. I downloaded the audio and saved it to the Truth folder. Then I opened a new document and titled it, Timeline of Misuse. That night, the file grew slowly. My breath was the only sound in the room, steady and quiet, against the hum of the rain outside. Around 10, I put on my coat. I didn't tell anyone I was going out. I just grabbed the letters Everett had written me, ones I hadn't scanned yet, and drove to a late-night coffee shop that had a working scanner in the back. The barista didn't ask questions. I ordered a black tea and took a corner table. The letters were soft from age, his handwriting more uneven in the later ones. One line read, "I love how you see people, even when they've forgotten how to see you." I rested my hand over that one for a moment before scanning it. I wasn't doing any of this for revenge. I just didn't want to be erased. When I got home, it was nearly midnight. I changed into a sweatshirt, tied my hair back, and sat on the floor near my desk. In the drawer beside me was the navy velvet cloth, the one with the little white daisies stitched into the corners. The same cloth that used to hold the ring, still clean after all these years. I took the flash drive where I'd saved the podcast episode and wrapped it in the cloth, not to protect it, just to remember. I placed it in my purse and zipped it shut. I wasn't ready to confront anyone, but something had changed. I wasn't unraveling anymore. I was gathering. Friday evening was quiet. My parents had gone out to dinner, and the house smelled faintly of my mother's lavender perfume. On the counter was a Tupperware of leftover meatloaf I had no intention of touching. I wandered back upstairs and opened the closet. In the far corner was a plastic bin, one of those cloudy ones that cracks at the edges. Inside was what was left of my childhood old CDs, birthday cards, faded Polaroids, and near the bottom, a stack of mini DV tapes I hadn't seen in years. The camcorder still worked once I plugged it in. I popped in one labeled Rachel, 6th birthday. The screen flickered, then came to life. I saw myself in a yellow sundress standing next to a chocolate cake with 6 candles flickering. I was smiling wide. Then Callista entered the frame, 8 years old, already taller. Without warning, she shoved my face into the cake. Laughter echoed from the camera. My mother's voice rang out laughing, not scolding. Callista. Little me looked around for help. No one moved. I paused the video. My hand gripped the edge of the desk. Downstairs, I heard the front door open. Keys in the bowl. Then quiet footsteps on the stairs. I didn't move. A knock on my door came, followed by it swinging open. My mother stood there with a small navy box in her hand. She didn't ask if she could come in. Just stepped forward and sat on the edge of the bed. "I was going through Nana's closet," she said. "Found these. She promised them to you. Remember? Figured maybe now's a good time." I opened the box. Inside were a pair of pearl drop earrings. Delicate, familiar. I blinked, unsure of what to say. "She didn't mean to hurt you," Vera said, smoothing her skirt. "Callista just handles things differently, and we thought you'd moved on from all that." All that. Like grief was something you packed away in a shoebox and pushed under the bed. I almost thanked her. I almost reached for them. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Liana, a college friend. The link led to Callista's Instagram story. She was sitting cross-legged on a patio, probably still in Bali, a pale smoothie in hand. Her voice soft, filtered light glowing around her. "Forgiveness is so powerful," she said. "Even when people lash out, I know it's just their pain talking." I rise above it. The earrings, the cloth, the deleted comment, all of it used as part of her narrative. Vera left not long after. Told me to get some rest. I didn't respond, just nodded. Once the door clicked shut, I turned on my laptop. The truth folder waited. I added a screenshot of Callista's story, then scanned the letter from Nana's will, the one with my name written beside the word earrings. Last I opened my voice recorder and spoke quietly into the dark. "I'm not doing this to expose them. I'm doing this so I never forget who they really are." Then I wrapped the earrings in their own cloth and slid them into a drawer. Not to wear, just to remember. It wasn't a single betrayal. It was a pattern. And that morning I stopped pretending not to see it. Saturday morning started early. The sky outside was still heavy with clouds, and the kind of quiet that comes after too many unspoken things had settled over the house. I didn't bother with coffee or scrolling through my phone. I opened the closet, found the navy blazer I hadn't worn since Everett's memorial, and slipped it over a clean button-down. The sleeves were a little loose now, but it still fit. I moved carefully. I didn't feel rushed. I wasn't angry. I folded the velvet cloth, the one I had wrapped around the flash drive, and placed it inside a clear envelope, along with a few other things I'd scanned and sorted the past few days. Receipts, letters, a copy of Nana's will, screenshots, a short audio file of my own voice recorded in a quiet room the night before. I zipped the envelope into a leather folio, picked up my keys, and walked out the front door without a word. 15 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of a small co-working space tucked between a yoga studio and a pet grooming shop. Ethan, the young guy at the front desk, handed me a key card without much talk. I took a table by the window and opened my laptop. The rain had started again, soft against the glass. I pulled up a document Everett's estate lawyer had shared with me a while back, just in case he'd said at the time, a template. I started filling in the blanks. Item 1. 4.1 carat engagement ring custom designed and purchased jointly by Everett Langford and Rachel Morgan 3 months prior to his death. Statement property held in trust until marriage, therefore sole ownership defaulted to surviving party. I attached copies of emails, dated photos, notarized letters from Everett's mother. I typed steadily, checking and cross-checking as I went. I added a signed affidavit describing how the ring had been sold without my consent and the emotional harm caused by its loss. At exactly 10:42 a.m., I clicked send. The message went to Pfizer and Ellis, LLP, addressed to Samantha Mira, a partner in the firm who had once spoken at Everett's memorial with quiet clarity. There was no dramatic moment, just a click and a breath. I closed my laptop and leaned back in the chair. Across from me, a ceramic mug of coffee had gone cold. I lifted it to my lips anyway. Later that afternoon, I stayed in the room. The space next door was being used by a nonprofit team. I could hear them practicing speeches and laughing between notes. At one point, a woman stepped into the hallway and smiled at me on her way to take a phone call. I nodded back, then opened another folder on my computer. This one had nothing to do with my family. It was called Reclaiming What Was Always Yours, the name of a women's leadership gala I'd been quietly funding since last fall, using what remained of Everett's trust. He always said legacy didn't need a name, just light passed on. The event was scheduled for next week at the Meadowbrook Center, just outside the city. The speaker stipends the venue, the florals, even the stage signage. It was all under the umbrella of a small foundation I had registered last year. Just the initials, ER Trust. I opened the final slide deck, double-checked the transitions, and added one last photo, Everett and I at a community panel years ago sitting side by side. I remembered that day clearly. He had stayed late to help a woman fix her resume. Above the slide I typed, "In honor of those who give quietly." I hit send again, this time to the event coordinator. As I packed up, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "You got mail. Looks like a gala invite. Callista got one too. I think they want her to speak." How wonderful. I read the message. That was all. Then I laughed once, quiet and dry. It wasn't a surprise. I didn't RSVP. I didn't respond. They didn't need to know who had lit the stage. Just before sunset on the night of the gala, I pulled into the lot behind the Meadowbrook Center. From the outside, the building looked understated, but inside, everything shimmered candlelight reflected in glass bowls filled with floating white daisies. I spotted them the moment I walked in. Callista in a white gown that looked tailored just for her. Vera beside her whispering praise loud enough for anyone near the champagne table to hear. I stayed by the wall unbothered. My dress was black simple, no sparkle, just presence. Inside my clutch, tucked against my ribs, was the envelope, the velvet cloth pressed flat inside. The host stepped on stage and welcomed everyone. Dinner plates were cleared, wine poured. Then came the surprise guest speaker. Callista's name was announced. She took the microphone like it had always belonged to her. She began with a calm voice and steady smile. "Grief is a journey," she said. but some people wear it like a badge they refuse to take off. My fingers tightened around the edge of my clutch. "I want to talk tonight," she continued, about letting go, about not being defined by what hurt us, but by how we grow from it. She never said my name, but I was there in every sentence. I moved toward the coordinator near the screen controls and handed her the sealed envelope. "This is a featured donor message," I said. "It needs to be played now before the final speaker." She hesitated, then opened the envelope, read the card inside, and nodded. "I'll cue it." Back at my place near the wall, I stood still. Callista was wrapping up, thanking the organizers, the city, the brave women in the room. Applause rose, and then it stopped. The screen behind her dimmed. The house lights fell. White text appeared. "In memory of Everett Langford." The video opened with me sitting in a quiet room. "My name is Rachel Morgan," I said. "I don't need recognition tonight. I already had what mattered, and I lost it." The room shifted. Heads turned. 2 years ago, I buried my fiancé. We had picked out a ring together. It was taken, sold without my knowledge. That ring held more than a promise. It held memory, grief, love. The screen changed. A photo of Everett and me. A soft afternoon light behind us, his hand in mine. I funded this gala quietly, in his name. The theme, "Reclaiming What Was Always Yours," isn't just about leadership. It's about memory and truth. In the final frame, I look directly into the lens. Sometimes the people who suffer most are the ones expected to stay silent so the loudest can heal. The screen went dark. No one clapped. No one moved. Vera's hand was pressed to her mouth. Callista was frozen near the podium. A camera flash went off. Her face caught mid-expression, caught somewhere between confusion and something else she couldn't hide fast enough. I didn't stay. As I stepped outside, the air was crisp, a little colder than I expected, but it felt clean. I didn't need applause. I needed them to hear the truth in a room that couldn't look away. The next morning, I woke before the sun. My phone was buzzing before I'd even opened my eyes, vibrating in short bursts, like it already knew what I was about to walk into. I turned it over. 38 messages, 12 missed calls. My name was everywhere. I opened Instagram first. Callista's story was at the top of the screen. She was crying, perfect lighting, soft filter voice, shaking just enough to be believable. "I was ambushed," she said. "Last night was supposed to be about healing, not an attack." Her face turned slightly like she didn't realize the camera was still recording, but she did. Her voice dropped into that syrup-sweet register she used when she wanted people to feel sorry for her. "I've tried so hard to include my sister, but sometimes family can be your worst enemy." The comments were pouring in. "This is heartbreaking. You don't deserve this. She sounds jealous." I switched over to Twitter. 2 local blogs had already picked up her version of events: Resilience Coach Faces, Family Sabotage at Women's Gala, quotes from her podcast, clips from the story, a carefully curated image of a woman wronged by someone she claimed to still love. Then came the text from Vera. "You've broken this family apart. Are you happy now?" No follow-up, no explanation, just silence where an apology should have been. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was from Ethan, someone who had known both Everett and me long before Callista's branding ever came into play. "Don't let them own the final word," he wrote. "You've come too far to be pushed back into the dark." That was enough to get me out of bed. I pulled on jeans, a navy sweater, and slipped the velvet cloth into my coat pocket. Inside it was the USB drive and a single printed sheet, a transcript I'd typed out the night before. I didn't add commentary. I didn't dress it up, just her words from the podcast typed out exactly as she'd said them. The drive to the house was short. Every turn came back to me on instinct. When I pulled up, the front door was already cracked open. I could hear Callista's voice before I stepped inside low and tight like she was practicing what to say. Something about misinterpretation. Something about emotional abuse. Then she saw me. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I won't be long," I replied, stepping inside calmly. I walked to the coffee table and sat. I didn't ask if she wanted to hear me out. I didn't explain why I'd come. I just placed the transcript down, then unfolded the velvet cloth and laid it beside it. It was empty now, just a square of fabric that once held something too important to describe. Callista's voice dropped. "What is that?" "It's your voice," I said. "From the podcast. The part where you called me a grief addict." Her face lost all its color. "You don't understand how media works. I understand how truth works." She didn't speak after that, just stood there, lips parted, waiting for words that wouldn't come. I stood slowly. Vera stepped into the hallway just as I reached the door. Her eyes were wide like she'd just walked into a version of her life she didn't recognize. "We're family, Rachel," she said quietly. "You know that." I paused, not because I was unsure, but because I was done. "Blood doesn't mean anything without respect," I said. "I'm not here to belong anymore. I'm here to end the cycle." She didn't move, just stood there still searching for the script. I walked past her down the steps and out into the morning light. The clouds had started to shift just enough to let in a strip of gold across the driveway. I pulled the velvet cloth from my pocket, folded it gently, and tucked it away. It felt different this time. Clean. Final. I didn't leave because I hated them. I left because for the first time I loved myself more. The days that followed came quietly. I drove west, stopping just outside Napa. The air there was softer, less demanding. I'd signed the lease on a small storefront months earlier, but hadn't done anything with it until now. That morning, I unlocked the door for the first time. The sign above the window read, "Langford and Morgan, crafted with memory." Inside it smelled faintly of fresh wood and new paint. Brass fixtures, cream-colored walls, and a row of clean work tables under wide windows that looked out over the hills. Everything was quiet. Still. Mine. I lined my tools carefully along the shelves: pliers, flame torch polishing, wheels, tumblers. I hadn't realized how much I missed the smell of warming metal until I lit the burner for the first time. Within the first week, people started to come in. A young couple looking for wedding bands that felt personal. A woman in her 70s who asked if I could set a locket into a ring so she could carry her husband's photo with her, and sometimes someone would step in, slowly glance toward the back display and say, "You're the one from the gala, right?" I'd nod, smile, nothing more. In the corner of the shop, under a soft spotlight, sat a single glass case. Inside it was the velvet cloth framed flat beneath glass. Just above it, a small printed note. "This piece is not for sale. It cost everything to make." And resting in the center of the cloth was a band diamond and steel fused together. Etched along the side, a single daisy. One afternoon, a little girl came in with her parents. She walked straight to the case, pressed her nose to the glass, and pointed. "Who made that one?" she asked. I knelt beside her and rested my arms on my knees. "Someone who used to be quiet," I said. She turned to me with a puzzled look. "Are they better now?" I nodded slow and soft. "She's still learning," I said. "But she's not silent anymore." A week passed, then 2. I kept the studio open Monday through Saturday, closed on Sundays. Most days I came in early, kept the door unlocked, and let the quiet settle in around the tools. It was a rhythm I hadn't had in years. One morning I was finishing a chain repair when a florist from the shop next door stopped by. She brought a single white daisy in a mason jar, said it reminded her of the piece in the back display. I thanked her and placed it near the cash register. Later that afternoon, while sorting inventory, my phone buzzed with a message from an old family friend. Lorraine. We hadn't spoken since college. I opened the text, saw your tribute at the gala. Your mom never said anything but... She kept the video on her desktop. I read it again. Then I let it be. I didn't respond. I didn't forward it to anyone. I didn't use it as proof. I just let it sit where it landed. Sometimes an apology doesn't come with words. That doesn't mean you wait your whole life to hear it. That weekend, the sun came through the windows in a slow, golden wash. I was cleaning out a drawer in the back office when I came across the original receipt for the ring box, the navy velvet one with the embroidered daisies. The paper had yellowed at the corners. Next to it was the small note Everett had written me on a sticky pad years ago. Don't let them take your voice or your worth. I placed both side by side on the work table and stood still for a long time. The week after I finalized a set of wedding bands for the couple who had first walked in, they asked if I could include a tiny engraving, "Still Ours." I said I could. That same afternoon, I melted down a batch of scrap silver to cast a new pendant. While the mold cooled, I played an old folk song on the radio, something soft, low. I didn't know the words, but the melody felt familiar. A woman came in around 5:30 just before closing. She looked around without saying much. Then she walked slowly toward the back to the case under the spotlight. She stood there for a while, then asked without turning around, "Is that yours?" "Yes," I said. She nodded once. It stopped me. I don't know why, but it did. I nodded too. Some pieces don't speak, they just settle. By the time I turned the sign to closed, the air outside had shifted again. A breeze came in from the west, pushing the scent of early grapes and warm pavement. I turned out the lights locked up and stood on the sidewalk for a moment. There was no need to explain anything anymore. Back home, I made a simple dinner. Afterward, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and watched the shadows grow long across the hill behind the house. A single bird landed on the porch rail and stayed there for a moment before darting off. I didn't need much. The next morning, a letter arrived addressed to Langford and Morgan. The return label had no name, just a street in Denver I recognized. Inside was a typed invitation. Callista was speaking again this time at a wellness summit in Santa Fe. The printed headline read, "From Pain to Power, A Family Healer's Journey." The bottom of the flyer included a short quote. "Forgiveness begins when we stop expecting others to change." There was no mention of me, no mention of the ring, just her name printed in soft sage green next to the photo of her on a rock overlooking the ocean. I folded the flyer once and placed it in the bottom drawer beneath spare tags and blank receipt books. I didn't feel angry. I felt done chasing acknowledgement, done hoping for clarity that would never arrive. Later that week, a couple came in needing a bracelet resized. They didn't know my name, didn't ask about the gala, just handed over the piece with quiet trust. When they left, I turned to the case in the corner. The cloth, the daisy, the band still exactly where I had placed them. It hadn't moved, but I had. 3 weeks after Callista's summit in Santa Fe, an envelope arrived at the studio. Not in the mail, hand-delivered. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. Inside was a cream note card with embossed lettering. "You're invited." I almost set it aside without reading, but curiosity got the better of me. Callista was launching her second book. The invitation was for a private signing and dinner in Denver, hosted at a downtown art gallery. At the bottom, beneath her name, was a quote printed in pale gold, "Family is chosen when blood lets go." There was no personal note. The event was scheduled for a Thursday night. I wasn't planning to go. I even told myself I wouldn't. But the next morning, one of my regular clients came in and mentioned the gallery in passing, said she'd attended a show there a few weeks earlier and thought it was lovely. I didn't say anything, just nodded. By the time Thursday arrived, I had already chosen an outfit. Gray slacks, a navy blouse, simple jewelry. I closed the shop early, turned out the lights, and made the drive into the city. The gallery was narrow but well lit with pale wood floors and tall ceilings. Strings of Edison bulbs lined the beams. There were 20 or so guests already mingling when I walked in, most dressed in muted tones, some with scarves draped just so. A few wore lanyards from the Wellness Summit. I didn't announce myself. I moved quietly along the wall past an arrangement of framed pages from the book. Each display had a small quote printed beside it. One read, "What we carry from childhood, we either pass on or burn." I stood in front of that one for a while. Callista appeared near the back wearing white linen and gold cuffs. Her hair was curled loosely, and she moved with ease, greeting people with light touches on the arm. She looked different, more polished than I remembered. But her voice was the same. She didn't notice me. I stayed near the exit, close to a set of tall windows that overlooked a side street. I didn't eat anything, didn't sign the guest book, but I listened. At one point, she stood near the front and spoke into a handheld mic. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. This journey hasn't been easy, but it's been honest. The people who supported me, who saw me when I couldn't see myself, you're the reason I can stand here now." There was applause. Then she continued, "My family wasn't always on board, but in the end I found my people. Sometimes healing means walking away from the story you were handed and writing your own." A few guests nodded. One woman dabbed her eyes. Callista smiled. "And sometimes when you release what no longer fits, something better arrives." More applause. I didn't stay much longer. On the way out, I passed a small table holding signed copies of the book. I didn't take one. But beside the stack there was a display case. Inside it, framed and under glass, was a navy velvet box. Not the original, a replica. The stitching was nearly identical, the daisy embroidered in the same corner, the fabric the same soft suede. Below it was a plaque. This box held the weight of grief and the power of release. I stood still for a long time. I don't know how long it had been there. I don't know who made it. But the detail was exact. Too exact. I turned and left. Back at the studio, I sat for a while at my workbench. I didn't reach for anything. Just sat. The next morning, I arrived early, made coffee, and checked the messages. One stood out. Someone had seen my display online and wanted a custom piece for their anniversary. Said it reminded them of something they couldn't name. I replied with a time to come in. Later that week, I went back to the lockbox where I'd kept Everett's original receipts. I pulled them out along with the appraisal. Then I called an attorney. She met with me the following Tuesday. I brought everything. The appraisal, the gallery photo, the notes. She listened, asked a few quiet questions, then looked me in the eye. "There's enough here," she said, "if you want to pursue it." I didn't answer right away. She placed a hand on the folder and slid it gently back toward me. "But you don't have to." That night I sat with the folder in my lap for a long time. Then I made a decision. I didn't end up filing the lawsuit. I had every document, every statement, every signature. But somewhere between the attorney's quiet assurance and the walk back to my car, I realized I didn't want to spend another year chasing someone who had already let go. Callista had used the box, the story, the grief, the thread of something she didn't earn. She'd stitched it into her narrative, framed it like a relic. But that box hadn't saved her. I could see it now, it had marked her. I boxed up the documents and slipped them into storage. Not hidden, just closed. That was enough for me. A few months later, I was commissioned to create a set of keepsake boxes for a local hospice group. They wanted something small, simple, something families could use to hold goodbye letters or photographs. I worked on them slowly. Walnut frames, soft velvet interiors, tiny engraved plates on the lids, each one different. On delivery day, the director walked me through the building. Sunlight streamed through the wide front windows, casting long golden lines across the floor. There was a hush in the air, the kind that holds both sorrow and peace. She led me to a shelf near the end of the corridor where the boxes would rest until needed. I set them down gently one by one and noticed a small table near the window with a vase of wildflowers and a book of poetry. The last box I placed was lined in navy blue, a single daisy stitched into the corner. I didn't plan it that way. Later back at the studio, I sat on the back step and watched the wind move through the trees. It was quiet. No calls, no questions, no long shadows from the past. Just the present, clear and steady. I never heard from Callista again. Not after the gallery night, not after the book tour ended. Her name came up in an article once, something about a retreat she was launching. I skimmed the piece, then turned the page. The truth was, I didn't need anything more from her. Not an apology, not recognition, not a correction in the next edition. What I had was my name, my work, my piece. And that was more than enough. Sometimes justice doesn't look like a courtroom or a headline. Sometimes it looks like choosing not to carry the weight any longer. It looks like setting something down and walking away without looking back. If you've ever had to rebuild after someone rewrote your story, I hope you know this. You're allowed to start again. You're allowed to create something quiet and beautiful from the pieces they left behind. Thanks for listening. If this story reminded you of something in your own life, feel free to share it in the comments. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this one, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be right here.